The question sounds caring. The effect is control. A conversation feels unusually easy. The other person listens without interrupting. They nod at the right moments. They offer a small confession first, just enough to open the door. Then they ask you to share something real. You do. Your voice drops. Your guard lowers. You feel that rare sensation of being met. Later, the same person references your disclosure like a tool they keep in their pocket. This is vulnerability harvest. Disclosure turned into a handle. A handle is not a weapon by itself. A handle is a way to move something. When someone has a handle on you, they can tilt your choices without touching you. They can make your boundaries feel selfish. They can make your doubts feel disloyal. They can make your silence feel like betrayal. They do it by calling up what you already admitted. It is quiet. That is why it works. The first sign is how the intimacy starts. It starts with a soft share that feels safe because it is slightly vague. They reveal something that sounds personal but costs them little. It is enough to trigger reciprocity in you. Reciprocity is a social reflex. When a person gives a little, you want to give a little. The harvest uses that reflex the way a fisherman uses bait. It is not the first share that matters. It is what it buys. It buys your momentum. The second sign is the depth jump. A normal conversation has steps. You share a preference, you share a story, you share a feeling. Over time, the risk increases. In a harvest, the steps are skipped. You are guided quickly toward the most sensitive material. Wounds, shame, family patterns, fear. The harvester uses questions that sound therapeutic but are actually extractive. What are you most afraid of? What does that trigger in you? Where do you think that comes from? These questions can be good questions in the right container. In the wrong container, they are lock combinations. And the container is the point. The third sign is the implied role. The harvester subtly positions themselves as the person who can hold you. They become the witness, the interpreter, the stabilizer. They might use gentle language about growth, healing, self-awareness. The words feel clean, but the structure is hierarchical. You are the one being understood. They are the one doing the understanding. That hierarchy creates a dependency loop. You begin measuring whether you are seen by them. Being seen becomes the reward. Reward is how handles are installed. The fourth sign is the memory style. They remember your disclosures with unusual precision, not because they care, but because precision turns your past into leverage. They can quote you. They can paraphrase you. They can remind you what you said you wanted. Reminding sounds supportive. It becomes coercive when the reminder is used to close your options. When your options close, a handle is at work. The fifth sign is the direction of the support. Real support increases your agency. Harvest support increases their influence. It pushes you toward choices that benefit proximity to them, alignment with them, or dependence on them. It makes your self-care look like selfishness if it reduces access. It makes your boundaries look like avoidance if it blocks their questions. It makes your independence look like denial if it weakens their role as interpreter. Now the pivot that reveals the mechanism. At some point you hesitate, you slow down, you protect something, you say you don't want to talk about that, you take time to decide something. The harvester does not accept the pause as normal. They make it about your wound. They frame your boundary as fear. They interpret your no as pathology. They do this with the very language you offered earlier because you gave them the vocabulary. This is the conversion. Your disclosure becomes a map, and the map becomes a steering wheel. A Machiavellian read here is not cynical, it is accurate. Information is power when the other person keeps the right to reinterpret it. If someone collects personal information from you while resisting mutual limits, they are building asymmetry. Asymmetry is leverage. Leverage is control. You can keep the conversation warm and still refuse asymmetry. A stoic reed sharpens the edge. Your inner life belongs to you. Sharing is optional. You do not owe access to your interior to anyone's curiosity. Curiosity can be sincere and still be intrusive. The boundary is not whether the question is good. The boundary is whether you consent. A shadow reed is the part that stings. Many people cooperate with harvesters because the harvester offers what they crave, a stage where their pain becomes meaningful. Being witnessed feels like being redeemed. That longing is human. It is also exploitable. The harvester does not need to hurt you at first. They only need to make you feel special for being honest. Specialness is the bait. This is why harvesters often flatter your self-awareness. They praise your insight, they praise your openness, they praise your courage, then they attach conditions. Since you're so self-aware, you can admit this. Since you're so open, you can share this. Since you're so brave, you can do this hard thing. The praise becomes a contract. The contract says your identity depends on continued disclosure. Disclosure becomes rent. There is a clean difference between vulnerability and exposure. Vulnerability is chosen and bounded. Exposure is pushed and vague. Vulnerability makes you feel more coherent. Exposure makes you feel scattered. Vulnerability has an end. Exposure has no end. Harvesters need exposure because exposure keeps producing material. Material is what they trade in. A harvester will often test you with a confession ladder. They share something, you share something deeper. They share something again, but not as deep as yours. You feel a small imbalance, but you ignore it because the room feels warm. The ladder continues. Each rung costs you more than it costs them. Over time, they possess a detailed file on you while remaining mostly unreadable. Unreadable people are hard to hold accountable. Then comes the cash out. The cash out is not always dramatic. It can be a quiet steering attempt. They suggest who you should trust. They suggest what you should tolerate. They suggest what you should ignore. They suggest what you should confess publicly. They suggest which people you should distance from. The suggestions are framed as help. They are actually instructions that use your wounds as the justification. This is why harvesters love diagnostic labels. Labels shrink your identity to a problem. Once you are a problem, you require a manager. They offer to be that manager. Management is where the handle becomes visible. If you resist, they use the reversal trap. They accuse you of not doing the work. They accuse you of being defensive. They accuse you of running from growth. They might say you are repeating old patterns. Notice the structure. Your boundary is redefined as pathology. Pathology requires intervention. Intervention keeps them central. Centrality is the goal. So what is defense that doesn't turn you into a closed person? It is not cynicism, it is sequencing. The first defense is to slow disclosure by one step. If a question goes deep, you answer at a shallower level. You share the outline, not the nerve. You watch what happens. A safe person can hold an outline and still respect you. A harvester pushes for the nerve. Pushing is data. The second defense is to require mutuality, not performance. Mutuality is not symmetrical confession. Mutuality is shared limits. If you share, they share. If you pause, they accept it. If you set a boundary, they do not interpret it into a flaw. Mutuality is the opposite of harvest. Harvest is always one way in authority, even if it looks two-way in emotion. A pause is the simplest consent test in the world. A person who respects a pause respects you. A person who punishes a pause wants access, not connection. The third defense is to separate insight from obedience. You can accept an insight about yourself without letting another person use it as a command. Yes, I avoid conflict sometimes does not mean therefore you get to pressure me. Yes, I fear rejection sometimes does not mean therefore I must accept what you want. Insight is yours. It is not their lever. The fourth defense is to keep your repair private. Harvesters often push toward public displays because public displays create lasting records. Records can be weaponized later. If you need to repair something, repair it with the person involved, in bounded terms, with an end condition. Do not feed a crowd and do not feed an interpreter. The fifth defense is to build a personal rule for disclosure. Not a rule like never share, but a rule like I share depth only where I have seen repair. Repair is the true safety signal. When a person can admit their own error and adjust, they can be trusted with your interior. When a person cannot adjust, your interior becomes ammunition. Ammunition is what harvesters collect. If you already gave them material, you are not trapped. You do not need a confession or an apology. You reduce the flow. You stop giving new data. You stop confirming their interpretations. You correct gently when needed. That's not what I meant. I'm not discussing that. I'm deciding this on my own. You keep the language narrow. Narrow language is protection because it removes elastic meanings. There will be a moment where you feel tempted to explain your boundary. Explaining can be humane, but in a harvest dynamic, explaining becomes an invitation for analysis. Analysis becomes pressure. Pressure becomes steering. Your boundary does not need to be analyzed to be valid. It only needs to be stated. A wound can be cared for without being used. It can be tended in private, with stable people at your pace. The harvester wants to make the wound public, active, and governable. Governable wounds keep you dependent. Healed wounds do not. This is where the ending matters. A healthy conversation has closure. You share, you feel met, you move on. In a harvest, the conversation keeps returning to your interior as the main arena. Your life becomes a therapy session that you didn't consent to. The harvester stays near your wound because the wound keeps them necessary. If you want a verification test that is brutally accurate, do this once. Offer a specific way they can support you that does not involve access to your interior. Ask for something concrete, a task, a logistical favor, a simple preference respected. If they accept, they may be a helper. If they refuse and insist on talking, they may be invested in access, not support. Access is the commodity. A person who cares about you wants you stronger. Strength is not endless disclosure. Strength is agency. Agency includes the right to be private. Agency includes the right to say no without explanation. Agency includes the right to change your mind without being diagnosed. When you hold that, your vulnerability becomes what it should be, a choice. A choice has gates. Gates can open and close. If someone needs you permanently open to feel close, they are not seeking closeness. They are seeking control with soft hands. Verification is simple. If your boundaries make them more respectful, keep them. If your boundaries make them more manipulative, leave. You don't have to hate them. You don't have to expose them. You don't have to win. You just stop renting out your interior. That is the exit. Your life stays yours, and your vulnerability returns to its rightful place, inside your consent. There is a specific kind of sentence a harvester uses that sounds like empathy but functions like a probe. That must have been so hard. I can't imagine. You didn't deserve that. These can be true. The harvester adds a second clause that aims the probe. So tell me what happened. So what did you do? So what do you think you're really afraid of? The warmth is the solvent. The question is the extraction. Extraction feels intimate because it is close to pain. Another harvester move is to mirror your therapeutic language. If you mention boundaries, they use the word boundaries while pushing past them. If you mention triggers, they use the word triggers while provoking them. If you mention attachment, they use the word attachment while creating dependency. This is semantic camouflage. The words look clean, but the behavior is still acquisition. Clean words make the acquisition harder to challenge without looking anti-growth. Anti-growth is the accusation harvesters love. They will also try to create exclusivity around disclosure. They make it seem like you are rarely understood. They offer a private corridor of confessions. Then they imply that keeping secrets with them proves trust. Secrets can be bonding in healthy contexts. In harvest contexts, secrets are cages because secrets isolate you from alternative perspectives. When you cannot compare your experience with others, you cannot detect the pattern. Patterns are detected through comparison. The harvester tries to control your comparison set. They suggest that other people won't get it. They suggest that other people are unsafe. They suggest that other people are shallow. They install the idea that your interior is too precious for ordinary hands. That sounds flattering. It is also isolating. Isolation makes the handle stronger because there are fewer counterforces. Another refinement is the timed check-in. They ask for updates on your feelings at regular intervals as if they are tracking a project. How are you now? How did that land? What's coming up for you? These questions can be fine. The harvester turns them into compliance checks. If your feelings don't move in the right direction, you are treated as resistant. If your feelings do move, they claim credit. Either way, your interior becomes their metric. Metrics create authority. Authority creates dependence. A healthy witness wants you to be able to self-witness. A harvester wants you to need their mirror. Mirrors are powerful because they can be tilted. If they tilt the mirror, you begin seeing yourself through their angle. Their angle becomes your reality. This is how people become unsure of their own motives. They begin doubting their own memory. They begin asking permission for their own interpretations. That is not growth. That is subtle surrender. The best protective habit is to treat deep questions as earned, not as default. Earned means you have observed restraint. You have observed accountability. You have observed repair. You have observed an ability to accept your no without turning it into a story. Those observations create trust. Trust is not a feeling. Trust is evidence. Evidence accumulates slowly. This also means you don't shame yourself for being moved. Being moved is not weakness. Being moved is an organism responding to warmth. The correction is to pair warmth with verification. Verification is not suspicion. Verification is patience. You allow the person to show you over time that they can handle what they ask for. If they cannot handle it, you stop giving it. One column is what they ask for. The other is what they offer. Do they offer their own limits? Do they offer their own accountability? Do they offer practical support without demanding access? Do they offer endings, or do they keep reopening your interior? A harvester offers endless reopening. Endings are safety. One more complication matters. Sometimes the harvester is you. You can become the person who asks deep questions too fast because you like intensity. Intensity can feel like meaning. It can also be a shortcut around building trust. The defensive posture here is the same. Learn to tolerate slow connection. Learn to let intimacy be built through consistent behavior, not only through disclosure. Disclosure without behavior is theater. Behavior without disclosure can still be respect. When you orient toward behavior, you stop being hypnotized by confession. You start valuing the boring proofs, the ability to accept no, the ability to apologize without bargaining, the ability to disagree without punishment, the ability to keep your secrets without collecting them. If those boring proofs exist, your vulnerability can be shared safely. If they do not, your vulnerability is not a bridge. It is a handle, and handles are meant to be held, so you keep yours. There is an additional verification move that is quiet and decisive. Watch whether they can stay with ordinary reality. Suggest a normal activity that has nothing to do with your interior, a walk, a task. A shared silence, a simple plan. A harvester often gets bored when there is no extraction. They steer back toward talking. They steer back toward feelings. They steer back toward your past. They do this because their closeness is wired to access. Real closeness can tolerate neutrality. Neutrality is not coldness. Neutrality is space where you are not performing your pain. If they cannot tolerate neutrality, you do not need to accuse them. You simply limit the channel they are trying to expand. You keep your conversations practical. You keep your disclosures shallow. You keep your boundaries clean. This is not punishment. It is containment. Containment prevents harvesting. The ultimate test remains the same. Do you feel more sovereign after contact or less? Sovereignty is the body's answer to safety. If you feel more capable, more grounded, more free, the bond is likely healthy. If you feel more unsure, more compelled, more watchful, you are being handled. Handled people explain themselves. Sovereign people choose. When you choose, your vulnerability stops being a public utility and returns to being private property. And private property has gates. A final trap hides inside accountability language. The harvester suggests that true honesty means total transparency. They imply that privacy is avoidance. They imply that secrecy is shame. This is moral pressure disguised as self-development. Transparency can be valuable. Total transparency is not a virtue. Total transparency is a vulnerability policy, and policies can be exploited. A stable person does not need your total transparency to trust you. They need consistency. Consistency includes honoring your limits. Consistency includes allowing you to keep parts of your life for yourself. Consistency includes letting you have inner rooms you don't tour for visitors. Those rooms are not lies, they are boundaries. The harvester tries to make boundaries sound like deception because deception is a guilt trigger. If you feel guilty, you explain. If you explain, you provide more data. If you provide more data, the handle gets stronger. So you treat the guilt trigger as part of the mechanism. You let the guilt flare, and you still keep the door closed. This is how you stop being trained. There is also a practical repair. If the harvester already has a file on you, you stop updating the file. Old data loses power when it is not refreshed. You avoid reacting to their interpretations. You avoid defending your motives. You avoid correcting every misread. Correction can become another extraction session. Instead, you correct only what affects real decisions, and you do it briefly. Briefness is dignity. If they try to reopen your interior by referencing old disclosures, you can use a simple boundary. That's not a conversation I'm having. If they demand reasons, you do not offer reasons. Reasons are the handle they want. You offer the boundary again, then you move on. Moving on is the part that breaks the spell. The spell of harvest is that everything returns to your wounds. When you stop returning, you leave the harvester holding an empty net. And that is the point. You are not punishing anyone. You are simply refusing to be a resource. You can be kind and still be non-extractive. You can be warm and still be sovereign. You can share and still keep gates. That balance is what the harvester cannot tolerate because it means there is no handle. No handle means no steering, and no steering means you are free. Freedom does not require you to become guarded with everyone. It requires you to become paced. A paced person is open in the right containers and closed in the wrong ones. That is not paranoia, that is competence. Competence looks like this. You give small truth first. You watch what happens. You escalate only when you see restraint. Restraint is the clearest form of care. When restraint is present, vulnerability becomes a bridge. When restraint is absent, vulnerability becomes a handle.